Walter Valentino Liberace began as a piano player for a local Milwaukee radio station and ended up playing Carnegie Hall. From his humble beginnings in Wisconsin, Liberace perfected an act which combined impressive piano playing with elaborate costumes, humor, and showmanship. Perhaps the only thing as extravagant as his flamboyant lifestyle was his generous spirit. His friends knew him as Lee, but to the world, he was Liberace.
I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places.
Liberace was a genius, a real genius. I thought he was one of the greatest showmen that I ever saw in my life.
This guy could play the piano, but he was a showman, and he had that great big smile, and everybody just, they loved to see him on the early television.
Start the day with a smile, and you'll never be blue.
He was such a showman, you know. Oh, he was so funny, playing that piano and bouncing around on that bench. I just remember him and I smiled.
And put a smile in his face.
He was a darling person. He, of course, probably wasn't a really happy person because he had such a dual life, which he wanted to keep such a secret. And he didn't realize that it was no secret.
And he knew all of these diamonds and furs and feathers and cars and this great big extravaganza was silly, but fun silly.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Showmanship, Liberace.
Liberace. His name is synonymous with flamboyance, glitz, and showmanship. He sold out concerts from Las Vegas to Australia, playing to royalty, presidents, and devoted fans everywhere. His Emmy Award-winning television series in the 50s was watched by more people than I Love Lucy.
I don't care if it's August, December, or June.
The image of Liberace became part of our culture, from comic strips to song.
That's what happens when Liberace winks at me.
From television to film. With million-dollar trappings, his lifestyle projected an image of extravagant excess.
Every time I wear this, I think of what Mae West once said when she said, "Too much of a good thing is wonderful."
Although Liberace personified extravagance, his childhood was less than glamorous. In the early 1900s, after immigrating to America, Liberace's parents settled in a small suburb of Milwaukee.
I was the third child of an Italian father who came from a fishing village near Naples called Formia. My father was a professional French horn player, and my mother, who is Polish-German, also came from a very musical family.
There were two children already in the Liberace family, George and Angelina. And then on May 16, 1919, twins. One died, and the survivor, a 13-pound boy, was named Vladu, or Walter, Valentino after Rudolph Valentino, Liberace. As a child, Liberace was quite fragile and often sick, and his medical bills were a financial strain on his family.
It wasn't an easy thing. I mean, he wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth, that's for sure. It was a very poor childhood they had. But music came first. And when they would be rehearsing, and that was one thing the father and the mother made sure that they did rehearse. And George would be in the attic. Lee would be on the first floor playing piano. They were just brought up on music, even though they were very poor.
Growing up with music all around him, Liberace could already pick out tunes on the piano by the age of 4. By 7, he was playing Mendelssohn's Midsummer Night's Dream. In that same year, he met his idol, the ex-Prime Minister of Poland, the great Ignacy Jan Paderewski, one of the century's most celebrated musicians. His mother had worked for Paderewski in the old country. And during his American tour, he took time out to see the Liberace family. It was Paderewski's one-name fame that would eventually influence young Walter to become simply known as Liberace. Realizing young Liberace's potential, his father sought out a more serious instructor at the Wisconsin School of Music. He hired Florence Betray Kelly to teach his son the classics. Florence was also the staff pianist at a local radio station where Liberace was first exposed to various types of music. The classics came easy to him, but so did ragtime and boogie-woogie and show tunes. After seeing how talented he was, his teacher arranged for a scholarship so that he could continue his study. Even with the scholarship, there was little money, so the family continued to struggle to make ends meet. And in 1931, when the youngest brother Rudy was born, there was an additional mouth to feed and things got even harder. Despite his family's destitution, Liberace, who was determined to stand out even then, still managed to sport a vest, suit, and spats to school every day. While he was in high school, Liberace was known as the boy who played piano for fashion shows and dance recitals. At just 17 years old, he became the regular guest soloist on his music teacher's radio show and became the principal breadwinner for his family. When he graduated from high school in 1937, the caption under his yearbook picture read, "Our Wally has already made his claim with Paderewski, Gershwin, and others of fame." The youthful Liberace wanted to succeed in popular music more than anything. But his father was not pleased by this. He believed the classics were the only respectable form of music, and this became a constant struggle between them.
He didn't go for that at all. He mostly wanted all the classics. He wanted all the children to become classical musicians. But as they got older, George and Lee both knew that there was no money to be made in the classics. So that's why they went into the popular field.
I realized very, very early in my career that the demands of being a concert pianist were very exhausting. And I always liked to have had some kind of fun with my work. I didn't want it to be a force that made me do something I didn't really want to become. I was happy to play classical music. I loved it. But the people that I played the classical music for were just a handful of musical purist types. And these were really not the people that I wanted to please. I really longed to please the man on the street.
Despite the bright future that awaited him, this was a difficult time. His parents were spending less time together, and one night while he was passing by a local theater, Liberace saw his father in a crowd with another woman, who was eventually to become his stepmother. Being extremely close to his mother and not wanting to hurt her, Liberace kept his father's affair a secret. Feeling powerless over his parents' relationship, Liberace began to immerse himself totally in his music, one area where he felt in complete control. As he studied even harder, his teacher arranged for an audition with the Chicago Symphony. His talent and drive impressed the symphony, and he was hired to play with them at the Pabst Theater in Milwaukee, ironically the very same theater where he had seen his father courting another woman. He ventured away from the classics by performing late nights in clubs with a local group, the J. Mills Orchestra. His versatility of playing the classics as well as popular music became his trademark.
A concert at, I think it was La Crosse, Wisconsin. He's playing a classical concert, and at the end, when he's taking his bow, someone from the audience, yelled out. Oh, he said he asked for requests, and someone from the audience yelled out, "Three Little Fishies." And so Liberace played the Three Little Fishies, but he played it as Mozart would play it, as Beethoven would play it, as Chopin would play it, and the audience was in stitches.
Liberace had a very special thing with music, because what he did, he took classical music and embellished it. He improvised with it, and he made it more palatable to the average ear.
The Chicago Symphony was embarrassed with his nightclub performances of popular music. So, in order to avoid any conflict, Liberace changed his name to Walter Buster Keys for his racier late-night persona. He traveled east to Pal's Cabin Supper Club in New Jersey, where he performed with the J. Mills Orchestra and Henny Youngman. He soon found work in New York as the pianist at the Persian Room of the Plaza Hotel. For the first time, Liberace was living the life of a touring musician and developing a style that eventually would captivate millions. Liberace was living in New York playing at local clubs when war broke out in 1941. He was exempted from military service because of a childhood back injury. His brother George, however, enlisted in the Navy, where he conducted the Navy Band. That same year, Liberace's parents broke up. A bitter divorce then further estranged Liberace from his father and cemented the bond with his mother.
The father divorced his mother, and he just resented the way his father treated his mother, and he did everything in the world to make up for what his father didn't do.
At 22 years old, in an effort to define who he was as an entertainer, Walter Valentino Liberace officially became just Liberace. He began his recording career at the end of the war by making several singles with small labels, all using this new persona. And it was at this time that his brother George joined him in New York and started accompanying him on violin.
His father asked George to go to New York to be with Lee and sort of be a father-type image, I guess. And that's how they got started together. George was his manager for a while and also his conductor. And they would, as they would go between shows, they would get in the car and they would see a high tower off in the distance. And they would drive the car right to there, and that was a radio tower. They would drop off their records there. And that's how Lee became known in some of the southern states.
George was a natural at managing and promoting his brother. It wasn't long before they had signed with a major booking agency. Liberace's performances became larger and more prestigious. In 1945, when Liberace saw a biographical movie about Chopin, he became enchanted with the prop that was used in the film. Looking for some way to stand out from other musicians at the time, he decided he should adopt it as his trademark for his own act, the candelabra. As he was becoming more established, he had a team of people working to advance his career. Self-promotion, however, always came naturally to Liberace, and he often came up with ideas to move his career forward even faster. He printed programs and mailing cards with the phonetic version of his name and sent them to various clubs and concert halls around the country. The talent buyer for the New Frontier Hotel in Las Vegas received one of these cards and hired Liberace for his first Las Vegas engagement. From the very beginning, Liberace's style and flair seemed right at home in Vegas, and before long, audiences and other performers were taking serious note of this piano player from Milwaukee. Even the infamous Bugsy Siegel saw Liberace's potential and wanted to hire him away from the frontier to play at his own hotel, the Flamingo. While the offer was almost too good to refuse, before Liberace had to make a decision, Bugsy Siegel was murdered.
shake. I start to shiver, and every fiber in my being seems to quiver. It's a feeling very close to ecstasy. That's what happens when Liberace winks at me.
He performed and socialized with the likes of Jimmy Durante, Sophie Tucker, Judy Garland, and Debbie Reynolds.
He was so sweet to everybody. He was never unapproachable. He was totally approachable and would sign autographs and cared a lot about his public.
As Liberace's popularity was building, his fans ranged from Las Vegas housewives to world leaders, including the Pope.
If you were a fan and you walked up to Liberace, he would be very gracious, very giving, very loving. And within the first 5 minutes, and he would take time with you, you would forget that he was Liberace.
But movie executives had a hard time forgetting who he was. He was offered a role that was created for him as a pianist in the film South Sea Sinner with Shelley Winters. From being a sickly child in Milwaukee to being a world-famous entertainer and Las Vegas headliner, it seemed that Liberace's life was almost too good to be true. Yet he struggled with the complications that so often come along with success. In a search for some way to deal with these complexities, Liberace became enamored of a book called The Magic of Believing. The book confirmed his belief in affirmative thinking, and it became his Bible, and he studied it for the rest of his life.
We were both plodding along, not really getting anywhere, until we read a certain book, The Magic of Believing, by Claude Bristol. It changed Lee's life, to the extent that Prentice Hall put out a Liberace edition, and it had a white cover with his logo on it, and it was his edition of that book. Now, until I read that book, quite by accident, I was the same person with the same energy and talent, but nothing ever worked out because of my attitude. But this book changed both our attitudes towards ourselves, and that's when you get dynamite.
Liberace's popularity was exploding. He dazzled audiences at every performance, and as he became more focused on his career, Liberace looked to exploit his talent even further. His brother George invited veteran manager Seymour Heller to see their act.
I do two things when I'm watching a talent the first time. I watch first, see how they look and how they do what they do when they come out. After they start performing, I then look at the audience. I want to see what he does or she does to an audience. And after about 10 bars, I turned around, looked at all the audience, and they're all sitting there like they're mesmerized. So I thought, oh my God, this is something else. So I immediately turned to the attorney. I said, we've got a deal. At 15 bars, I decided this man was for me. Because I knew, I felt that he had something that's far and above being a good pianist.
Liberace signed with Heller, and his new manager arranged for him to be the summer replacement host for Dinah Shore's show. Immediately, people noticed his natural charisma shining through the television screen. The national exposure really gave his career a boost, and he soon signed a syndication deal for his own network show. Halfway through the show's first rehearsal, the director told Liberace that he should not look into the camera, that it was simply not done in television, that he should address the studio audience. But Liberace, realizing that his bigger audience was at home watching their television sets, ignored that direction and insisted on playing to the camera directly, and a whole new intimate style was born on network television. The Liberace show was so successful it was syndicated to 180 stations throughout the country. Although there was no admission price for the show, women were so taken with him that they were paying up to $50 for tickets. With over 45 million viewers, Liberace became a household word. But along with success of this magnitude comes a price, and Liberace paid dearly. He paid with his privacy.
Now don't go around complaining. Just keep yourself in training. Don't let little troubles get you down. It doesn't pay to wear a frown. Start the day with a smile. It's so easy to do. Take off the frown that covers up your face and put a smile in its place. Up on your toes, inhale, throw out your chest, exhale, take a deep breath. Sing a song and you'll be happy as the day is long.
Liberace had a lot to be happy about. After only a few weeks, his television show was a huge success. He was busier than ever. When he was on his summer hiatus from the series, Liberace continued to perform at concert halls around the country. During his first Hollywood Bowl appearance in 1952, Liberace was yet again determined to set himself apart. This time from the musicians in the Los Angeles Philharmonic Orchestra.
Lee came over to me and said, "Seymour, I have an idea." I said, "What is it? What do you want, Lee?" He said, "I can't wear a black outfit. There's going to be 90 men sitting around me in black outfits. And the people are way up there in the Hollywood Bowl with the 20,000 people. They won't even know who the piano was from the violinist. There'd be little specks, see?" I said, "What do you have in mind?" "I'm going to wear a white suit of tails." So I mentioned that to the Bowl people. They're whores. How you dare wear a white outfit in front of the Philharmonic Orchestra? It's sacrilegious. Well, he said, "Look, if I either wear a white suit of tails, I don't play." And then later on, about a year or so later, my wife and I gave him a black and gold jacket. And I said, black and gold. That was the next step. After the black and gold, then there was rhinestones. And on and on and on.
While his wardrobe was growing, so was his popularity. And he soon signed his first major recording contract with Columbia Records. And his first 3 records went to the top of the charts. In 1953, he won 2 Emmy Awards for his television series. Success as a performer was his, but he knew that to attain success as a musician, he would need to conquer the more serious classical audiences at more prestigious venues. That prestige would come in the form of New York's Carnegie Hall. Although he was cautioned against the engagement by his advisors due to the possibility of bad reviews by the critics, appearing there was a childhood dream of Liberace's ever since his father sat him down at a piano for the very first time. So Liberace was determined to go on with the performance. The sophisticated New York audience loved him. But, as predicted by those closest to him, the critics were less than amorous. The tone was even mean-spirited in certain reviews. Even though the reaction from the critics was harsh, he and his brother George were crying all the way to the bank. That is a now famous phrase actually coined by Liberace. His life and career seemed to be right on track. The only thing missing, at least according to his mother, was a wife.
When I was a boy, my mother often said to me, "Get married, boy, and see how happy you will be." Well, I have looked all over, but no girlie can I find who seems to be just like the little girl I have in mind. Well, I will have to look around until the right girl I have found. Just like the girl that married dear old Dad.
He began to date Joanne Rio, who lived across the street from him in North Hollywood. She was a showgirl at the Moulin Rouge nightclub. They fell in love and announced their engagement. But they met with an insurmountable resistance to the marriage, both from Joanne's father and from Liberace's female fans. The fans were furious that he would dare devote himself to any other woman than his mother, and Joanne's father was convinced that Liberace could never make his daughter truly happy. Liberace acquiesced and broke off the engagement. Once again, he turned to his career and continued his demanding touring schedule. Studio head Jack Warner saw Liberace perform in San Francisco and offered him his first starring role in a feature film. Again, Liberace's friends and manager warned him against it, claiming it was very chancy to try and translate his gifts to the big screen. However, Liberace would not be dissuaded. Warner Brothers released Sincerely Yours, and although the critics praised Liberace and the film, the box office numbers were dismal. The studio executives explained this by saying people would not pay $1.25 to see a star they could see for free on television. Even with the movie's failure, Liberace's popularity was growing beyond his expectations. He earned over $7 million from his television series, which was more successful than ever. Only one other performer rivaled him at that time, the king himself, Elvis Presley.
When Elvis first played Las Vegas, I believe it was the Frontier Hotel, Lee told me this story, and he came backstage with his manager, Colonel Parker, and he was a little nervous, Elvis was, and I guess excited about opening at the Frontier, and Lee asked him what he was going to wear, and he told Lee, and Lee said, well, you can't wear anything like that, so Lee loaned him one of his gold jackets. And he wore it, for that engagement there. And that's basically how Elvis started with all his, flamboyancy of the clothes, like Lee did too.
Playing with the king of rock and roll may have been Liberace's first encounter with royalty, but it wouldn't be his last. In the mid-50s, Liberace was one of the biggest stars in America. He sold out houses wherever he went. He played with the king. Now it was time to play for the queen. He was invited to England for a command performance. It seemed life was treating him royally, but his trip to England was bittersweet. Gossip columnist William Connor, better known as Cassandra, wrote that Liberace was an appalling man, the biggest sentimental vomit of all time, slobbering over his mother, winking at his brother, and counting the cash every second. A sugary mountain of jungling claptrap wrapped up in such a preposterous clown. Liberace was incensed. He sued the newspaper for libel.
There is a sort of cancerous journalism that is out to destroy a person. And this is very difficult to correct. Nobody kids myself more than I do. I think the public appreciates the fact that I get a bigger charge out of my costumes, my candelabra, and all this sort of showmanship than even the people in my audiences do. The only thing that hurts me is when the criticism goes below the belt.
After years of litigation, Liberace finally won. But his award covered only half of the legal fees that he had already incurred. Meanwhile, back in America, rumors about Liberace's lifestyle concerned his brother George and was the topic of many arguments. The fighting escalated, and eventually Liberace fired his older brother. His family problems continued when Liberace's younger brother Rudy, a longtime alcoholic, was found dead in a hotel room. The stress of this grief-stricken period, along with Liberace's rigorous touring schedule, began to take its toll on his health. So much so that he ended up in the hospital with kidney failure and nearly died. During his recovery, he realized he needed to slow down in his career and search for other ways to fulfill himself. He began to surround himself with beautiful antiques. He even went one step further. He opened his own store in Los Angeles, Liberace Interiors and Objets d'Art.
I would like to feel that all the antiques I have collected will be enjoyed by people long after I become a memory. They don't really belong to me. They belong to the world.
If he saw an antique, everywhere I travel, like I'd be in Houston, Texas, and I'd be going to an antique store, he was there the month before. They'd say, oh, Mr. Liberace just bought this armoire. I said, oh, it's fabulous, you know. Or he bought this mirror. Wherever I traveled, I'd come right behind or in front. Liberace was there buying things.
Not only did he buy things for his antique collection, but also for his friends and his family. Christmas was his happiest time of the year. Liberace went out of his way to make sure that everybody got a unique and personal gift.
Exciting. Everybody was looking to see what the gift was going to be. And he did. He gave jewelry. He gave fur coats. And he would surprise you. And he bought most of my clothes, my evening gowns, because I went out a lot, and he wanted me to look nice.
The late 60s and the early 70s were happy times for Liberace. His television specials were an opportunity for him to work with some of his dearest friends.
I promised Debbie, if she'd be a guest on my show, that she could borrow the coat. Of all the wonderful talent that plays this famous Las Vegas Strip, she is one of the greatest, and she's my friend, too. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Debbie Reynolds.
I did 2 of his specials because he called me, and I played Orphan Annie, and he was Daddy Warbucks. But I have special memories of him. I really loved Lee.
The stunts that he generated publicity with were this clothing, these fantastic outfits, which often involved fur, expensive fur, exotic furs, which were terribly luxurious. Then he started to fly.
His extravagant stage shows, his bigger-than-life persona, and elaborate costumes continued to delight his audiences.
Mary Poppins, eat your heart out.
The average costume was $100,000, $150,000. Each one involved a suit and a cape, which you would use to make an entrance with, twirl around in it, make points about it, and throw it off into the arms of whoever was chauffeuring the car. They were embroidered with all different kinds of jewels, rubies, emeralds, diamonds, whatever. Artificial, of course. And embellished with fur, mink, sable, chinchilla, fox, onward, ever onward. The costumes progressed. Each one became more elaborate than the one before, and of course, obviously more expensive along the way. We finally hit $300,000 with one coat.
In addition to his expensive wardrobe, Liberace obsessively collected jewelry, cars, and houses. His greatest extravagance was his home in Palm Springs, which he called the Cloisters. In another home in Las Vegas, he had a replica of the Sistine Chapel ceiling in his bedroom. Liberace's lavish lifestyle followed him wherever he went, especially on stage.
He liked the embellishment. Whatever he could use on the set in the way of embellishment, he would use. Whatever was in the way of costumes, he would use. In his cars, in his choice of pianos, the elaborateness of the pianos themselves. Diamond-studded. We did a diamond-studded suit that had to match a diamond-studded piano with a diamond-studded car.
Although he was seemingly delighted on the surface, people close to Liberace felt he was still struggling to live a dual life.
I think he must have been ashamed. You know, to come out is the word they use. Well, come out of the closet, you know. I brought facial surgery out of the closet. And some people can't bear to, I guess they just have such an old-fashioned idea about people's attitudes and just don't want to face it. Oh, look, it's called denial.
In the 40s or 50s or 60s, there was a stigma to that, and it wouldn't have helped Lee if all of his lady fans thought that he was living another style of life. It would have bothered them probably and maybe hurt them. Maybe they would have been disappointed. He didn't want to disappoint anybody. And of course today is a different sort of era where people do say that they are homosexual or that they are whatever, and you don't get criticized for that today.
In 1977, at 58 years old, his search for a live-in companion had finally ended when he met Scott Thorson. Later that year, Liberace's estranged father, Sam, passed away at the age of 92. In addition to being worried about the effect of his father's death on Liberace, many of his closest friends had concerns about his new relationship. Ignoring his friend's advice, he continued to embrace his relationship with Scott.
He even, I guess with some persuasion on Scott's part, decided that Scott should be in the show. I would do the chauffeur outfits for Scott. It didn't last very long. I think a couple of gigs in Las Vegas, and it was dropped.
Liberace may have been the only one who didn't see the problems that awaited him. At 60 years old, Liberace was looking to ensure his status as a legendary performer. He opened the Liberace Museum in Las Vegas and established the Liberace Foundation, which provides scholarships to young performers. He used this as an opportunity for him to reconcile with his older brother George, who Liberace asked to run the museum and the foundation.
When Lee approached us about the museum, said he had so many things he just didn't know what to do with them. Lee was one who always helped younger people to get a start in show business. So he said, what would be a better way than starting a museum? And then all the proceeds go toward the performing arts.
On November 25, 1980, Liberace was devastated by the death of his beloved mother, Frances, who he had adored his entire life. While he was recovering from the tragic loss of his mother, he had broken up with his live-in companion, Scott Thorson, and was shocked when Scott Thorson filed a $380 million palimony suit.
Scott Thorson probably hurt Lee more than any single individual or situation in the world. He was very good to Mr. Thorson. They were good friends. Lee was devastated. And I remember him telling me that he was so frightened as to what the audience would do. He says when he hit the stage, it was like a magic that just shot across the footlights with the applause and the roar, and he knew then that he had nothing to worry about but entertain those people. They wanted to be entertained.
The judge dismissed the suit, and Liberace emerged once again to pick up the pieces of his career. To his many live performances, he appeared on his favorite soap opera.
So please, it's my pleasure to introduce to you my wonderful, wonderful friend, Liberace.
Was a guest on Late Night with David Letterman, The Muppets, and Oprah. He topped off his comeback with a record-breaking engagement at Radio City Music Hall. But time was catching up with Liberace. His older brother George died of leukemia in 1985. And although Liberace continually reinvented himself, at this point his friends began to notice that he was not looking well.
I didn't know he was that ill at the time. I could see that he was not feeling well when I saw him, but I didn't know that he was close to dying. He didn't let us in on that at all.
Rumors of AIDS were beginning to saturate the press.
We had been there visiting him, the sister and I, and we were getting ready to leave. And I was sitting waiting for the chauffeur to pick us up. And he pulled his robe back because I was like a mother to him. And he said, see, Glad, I don't have AIDS, and I'll be back in Vegas with you in a little more time.
Well, Lee never wanted anyone to know he was really ill because Lee didn't want to know that this disease is so insidious that there is no cure. You can hardly believe that when that disease is yours. And I fully think that Lee felt he would be saved.
Liberace was as optimistic as ever, but the complications from his illness were quickly wearing him down.
I met him in the hallway, and I hugged him, and when I hugged him, it was the first time that I felt the bones in his chest, or on his back. And then I became afraid. I knew that something possibly was wrong.
I got a call here at home from his lawyer, Joel Strout. And Joel said, Ray, if you want to see Lee again, you better come down, because it's just a matter of time. He's in a coma. So I jumped in the car and I drove to Palm Springs, and they prepared me. So I went into the bedroom, and it was a shock. You know, he weighed about 100 pounds. You know, he was breathing heavy.
When I got there, he was already in a coma. But I still swear when I was holding his hands, I felt his finger move just right before he passed away.
On February 4th, 1987, Walter Valentino Liberace died. Millions of fans, friends, and family felt a great loss. And it was not the exaggerated, lavish image they missed. It was the man, his gentleness, his unique charm.
He would want to be remembered as a piano player from Milwaukee. And we all know he was so much more than that. He would want you not to remember him as an entertainer as much as a humanitarian. He was beyond kind.
I miss his smile. I miss his style. I miss his kindness and his sensitivity. And I do miss him terribly. There'll never be another one like him. Never.
And I'll see you in the morning sun. And when the night is new, I'll be looking at the moon, but I'll be seeing you.
Liberace was truly a legend in his own time, and although he's no longer with us, his fans will never forget his trademark smile and his visionary showmanship.
I'll find